2013 MCQ paper, question number 26. It says, in 1 year, total spending on consumption, investment, and government purchases, which means the total of C, I, and then G was equal to 103% of a country's gross domestic product, which means the total of these three is 103 if you assume the GDP to be 100. So relative to GDP, the total of these three components is 103. If so, they ask us to recognize this would be possible only if which one of the following happens. All right. So to understand what has happened, you just need to first think how to calculate the GDP under the expenditure approach. So we all know that we calculate this GDP under this expenditure approach by taking the total of these four components, C, I, G, and also we take net exports. When we take the total of all these four components, you get GDP, and how much is the value of the GDP? That's just 100. But according to the question, what happens if you take the total of only these three components? There you get 103, right? So let me write 103 here. So 103 plus net exports will give us 100. So we can find the value of nx simply by solving this equation. So you can take nx, so you make it equal to 100 minus 103. So for net exports, we receive this minus 3. Right now, with this idea in mind, you can read all these given options and select the correct one. The first one says the money supply increased. See, we can't comment on the money supply simply by looking at these given values. So we can ignore that. And the second one says net exports were positive. No, net exports, that is a negative value, right? We got a negative value. The third one says net exports were negative. Yes, 100% true. And that's exactly what happened when we calculated the value. The fourth one says the government ran a budget surplus. Okay, so that's about budget surplus. And the fifth one says the government had a balanced budget. See that now we can't comment on the nature of the budget again by looking at only these given values. So that the only acceptable answer is the third one. Right, now come to this question 27. In question 27, it says, a closed economy has a banking system consisting of a single bank, which means for this entire economy, there is only one bank. It's a monopolistic situation. And the bank operates with a reserve ratio of 10%, which is SRR. Customers deposit rupees 10,000 in cash, assuming no subsequent change in notes and coins in circulation. What's the maximum amount of loans that this bank can grant? Since this is the only bank that we have for this entire economic system, when they ask the question, what is the maximum amount of loans that this bank can grant? In monopolistic situation, the firm and the industry both are same කියලා. එහෙම එකක් අපි කියනවනේ. ඉතින් ඒ නිසා ඒගොල්ලෝ අපෙන් ප්‍රශ්න අහුවම what's the maximum amount of loans that this bank can grant කියලා අහුවම ඒකේ සරල අදහස තමයි what's the maximum amount of loans that this entire banking industry, entire banking system can grant. එහෙනම් එහෙමයි ඒකේ අදහස ගන්න ඕනේ. So how do we calculate this maximum amount of loans? This is how we calculate it. We write maximum amount of loans equals deposit multiplier multiplied by the excess reserve, initial excess reserve. So to calculate this deposit multiplier, we simply take the reciprocal of SRR. So if SRR is 10%, the reciprocal of that would be 1 over 10%, which means 1 over 0.1. So this will give us this value of 10. So deposit multiplier in this economy is 10. So you write 10 into the excess reserve. See, the initial deposit is 10,000 and 10% on that is the statutory reserve. So initial deposit is 10,000. From that we take 10%. So that will give me just 1,000. And on total reserve equals statutory reserve plus excess reserve. So total reserve for the time being is 10,000. Statutory reserve is 1,000. If so, we can understand this excess reserve to be 9,000, right? Excess reserve is 9,000. So you take that 9,000 here. So 9,000 multiplied by 10 will be 90,000. So this is the maximum amount of loans that this bank or the entire banking system can grant. And our answer is the fourth one. 28. According to Keynesian theory, in which circumstances would there always be an increase in demand for money? So what do we mean by this term, demand for money? Demand for money is the desire of this general public to keep cash in the form of notes and coins. Now, for example, in your pockets, if you have a higher amount of cash in the form of notes and coins, your money demand is high, right? So we need to recognize in which one of the following circumstances this money demand will be really high, right? So what are the given variables? The first one is real income, second one is price level, and the third one is interest rates. So we will just discuss it in this way. We'll pick the first one, real income. So let's assume that this real income increases. If real income increases, what do we mean by that? The purchasing power, right? Purchasing power of the people increases, which means they can afford more goods and services. So they can engage in more transactions. So to buy more goods and services, they will need to increase money demand, right? They will need to increase this money demand. If real income increases, purchasing power increases, so they can buy higher amount of goods. So to buy this high amount of goods, they need to increase money demand. And they need to keep cash in the form of coins and notes. So that's about the real income. And the second one is price level. Price level. Okay, so let's assume a situation where the price level is high. If the price level is high, they will need higher amount of cash. People will need higher amount of cash to engage in transactions. So to engage in transactions, if they need higher amount of cash, what will happen? They will need to once again increase this money demand. They will need to keep notes and coins in their pocket. And the third variable given is interest rate. So let's assume if interest rate is high, if it is high, they can obtain bank loans. So when they can obtain bank loans, they will not be able to increase money demand. So what happens to the money demand? Money demand will decrease. Right? Money demand will decrease. So this is what will happen. In which one of the following options would there always be an increase in demand for money? Okay, if money demand needs to increase, then what needs to happen to the interest rate? The opposite should happen. If interest rates is lower, people will be able to obtain bank loans so that they can keep a higher amount of notes and coins in their pockets. So these are the three optimum conditions for this money demand to increase. And real income should increase. We'll find that real income should increase, price level should once again increase, and the interest rates should decrease. So the answer for this question is the third one. 29. Assume that the economy is at full employment. Policymakers wish to maintain the price level stable but want to encourage greater investment. Which of the following combinations of monetary and fiscal policies would best achieve this goal? Alright, so if the economy is operating at its full employment level, we can just present it by this diagram. So let me take the aggregate supply curve this way. This is the aggregate supply curve. And here you get the aggregate demand curve. And if the economy is at full employment level, it's operating at this point. The economy is operating at this point. This is the full employment level of income, and this is that relevant price level. Right. So let me just write here. This is the price level, and on this side we get the real output. Right. We get the real output. All right. So again, they need to increase investment. So if they just try to increase investment, what will happen to the aggregate demand? Inside aggregate demand, we have these components. We get the consumption expenditure, investment expenditure, government purchases, and also we have net exports. So if they try to increase this investment expenditure, what will happen to the aggregate demand curve? Aggregate demand curve will shift to the right side. And when that gets shifted to the right side, the price level, normally it increases. See, the two goals that they need to achieve are contradictory to each other. So if they try to achieve this, normally what will happen? They will not be able to achieve this. And on the other hand, if they try to achieve this, they will not be able to achieve this. But somehow, let's try to find the most accurate answer out of the given 5. Right. So to maintain a lower price level, the monetary policy has to be contractionary. But why? Just imagine that the monetary policy is expansionary. If the monetary policy is expansionary, what will happen? The interest rates, right? Interest rates will be very low so that the money supply will be high. When the money supply increases, aggregate demand, people receive more money to spend, so that the aggregate demand will increase. And when aggregate demand increases, once again the price level goes up. Right? So that what needs to happen to the monetary policy then? It should be contractionary. When the monetary policy is contractionary, the interest rates will be, this is the interest rate, right? Interest rate will be high and the money supply will be low, so that the policy makers will be able to maintain the price level at a lower rate. On the other hand, if they need to encourage investment, right, they can increase the government investment, right? They can increase the government investment. So what happens when the government investments get increased? ඇතරම government investments තියෙන මේක ඇතුලේ government investment expenditure, government consumption expenditure, we get both inside this government purchases, so this will be higher, right? And to encourage greater investment, they can increase their government expenditure. So when increasing the government expenditure, there will be an expansionary effect. So that simply to maintain a low price level, the monetary policy has to be contractionary, and to encourage investments, the fiscal policy needs to be expansionary. So the answer is the 5th one. Question 30. Which of the following policy choices represents a combination of fiscal and monetary policies designed to bring the economy out of a recession? Right. So if you look at the business cycle, the economy is at a recession. The economy is moving from this point to this point. And the government is trying to bring the economy out of this recession. Right. So if they need to do this, how do they need to manage this fiscal policy and the monetary policy? So that's what we need to select out of the given options. All right. So the first thing, if the government needs to bring the economy out of this recession, the first thing that the government should do is to increase this aggregate demand, right? They need to increase the aggregate demand. Why is that? Because when aggregate demand increases, even the production increases. When production increases, what happens to the level of employment? Even the level of employment increases. When the level of employment increases, what happens to the level of income? Income again increases. So this increased income they can once again use for consumption. So once again the aggregate demand will increase and this goes as a cycle. So the starting point of this cycle is here. The government needs to increase the aggregate demand using their fiscal and the monetary policy. So how do we use the fiscal policy to increase the aggregate demand? Earlier also I told you that this fiscal policy is always about government revenue, government expenditure and public debt. So if they need to increase the aggregate demand, look at this one, inside aggregate demand, and as we discussed under the previous question, this consists of C, I, G and then net exports. So if they need to increase the aggregate demand, they need to increase the government expenditure, and also they can reduce the government tax, so that they will be able to, by reducing taxes, they will be able to increase consumption and also to increase investment. So this fiscal policy must be expansionary in nature, right? It has to be expansionary in nature. And the other question is, how does the government uses this monetary policy to increase the aggregate demand? As we discussed under the previous question, if the government needs to increase the aggregate demand using their monetary policy, the first thing that they should do is to reduce interest rates. They need to reduce the interest rates. So when interest rates are lowered, what will happen? Money supply will increase. Then people will have more money to spend on goods and services, so that the aggregate demand will increase. එහෙනම් දේවල් දෙකයි mainly වෙන්න ඕනේ. මොකද්ද? Fiscal policy must be expansionary in nature, and on the other hand, even the monetary policy must be expansionary in nature. එහෙනම් fiscal policy එක expansion වෙනවා කියන්නේ මොකක්ද? government expenditure වැඩි වෙන්න ඕන, taxes අඩු වෙන්න ඕන. monetary policy expansion වෙනවා කියන්නේ මොකද්ද? interest rates අඩු වෙන්න ඕන. එහෙනම් ඔය ආන්සර් එක තමයි අපි හොයාගන්න ඕන. right. එහෙනම් අපි කියවමු the first one, decreasing both taxes. Okay, taxes decreasing and the money supply. No, money supply must be increased. As we discussed, the money supply should be increased. So this is wrong, but the first part is correct. The second one, increasing both taxes and the money supply. See, now this second part is correct, but the first part is wrong. The third one, increasing government spending. Yes, that's the expansionary fiscal policy, and decreasing the central bank interest rates. Very good. So this is what happens under expansionary monetary policy. So the answer for this question 30 will be the third one. But we will go through the other two options as well. Increasing both taxes. See, again, if taxes are increased, it will be contractionary in nature. So that is wrong then. The fifth one, engaging in deficit budgeting and selling securities in open market. See, engaging in deficit budgeting means having more expenditure than the government income. So that is somewhat true. But the second one says selling securities in the open market. So what happens when securities are sold in the open market? The central bank sells treasury bills and treasury bonds to the commercial banks, so that when these commercial banks buy these securities, they put all their excess money into the central bank. Then what will happen to the money supply in the economy? Money supply will decrease. If money supply is decreased, that goes under contractionary monetary policy. So this is again wrong. So they should do the opposite. then the answer for this question 30 is a third one. Question number 31. In an economy, the volume of output rises by 2% in a year, while the quantity of money rises by 5%. If the velocity of circulation of money remains the same, what will be the approximate increase in the price level and the nominal value of output? Right. So this is again related to statistics. So if you have done indices lesson in statistics, you should be able to understand this question precisely. මේක මම හරිම විදියට හදන්න ඕනි හරිම විදිහට මෙන්න මෙහෙමයි අපි හිතන්න ඕනේ. The first thing, by looking at all these data, you can understand that this question has something to do with this equation of exchange. So how do we write the equation of exchange? We write M into V equals P into T. So let me identify all these terms. M stands for the money supply, right? M is for the money supply in the economy, and V is for the velocity of money circulation, and P is for the price level, and T is for the real output, right? Real output. So if you multiply this P by T, if you take this whole thing, the product of P and T we recognize as the nominal output. This is the nominal output. T itself is the real output, but T multiplied by P is the nominal output, right? So when the question says that the volume of output rises by 2%, you need to think it in this way. If it was 100 previously, in this year, that has increased by 2%. So that the total output in this year has to be 102, right? The total output in this year has to be 102. So while the quantity of money rises by 5%. So once again, you just need to think about it in the exact same way. If it was 100 in the previous year, in this year, it has to be 105. So the money supply is 105 now in this year. And there's no change in the velocity of circulation of money, which means same as the previous year. So the value is still 100. I mean 100% precisely, right? And the question asks us to calculate what will be the approximate increase. See, now the question asks us to calculate the approximate value for increase in these two. Approximate increase in the price level and the approximate increase in the nominal value of output level, right? So simply you just need to find this P value. And how do we find this P value? P is equal to 105 into 100 divided by 102. So for P, you will have this value 105 multiplied by 100 divided by 102. So the value will be 102.94. See that now? This is the value of P. But the problem, this 102.94 is this year's value, but the question asks us to recognize the increase. So once again, you need to assume in the previous year, if it was 100, in this year it is 102.94. So that the approximate increase is how much? Exactly, that is 2.94. So that the approximate value is 3. So that's how we need to find this 3. Right? That's the precise way of finding this 3. එතකොට 3 නෙමෙයි හරිම answer එක. The exact answer is 2.94, but since they ask us to approximate the values, we can just take 3. Right? So that is one thing. The other thing is they ask us to calculate the increase in nominal value of total output. See, earlier we recognized this P into T, the product of P and T, to be the nominal output. So let's write once again, nominal output equals P multiplied by T. So in this year, price level is 102.94. We found that value. And the real output of this year is 102 that is given to us in the question itself. So we need to find these values relative to the previous year 100 as an index in statistics. So you just divide this by 100 and the value is once again 102.94 multiplied by 102 and that is divided by 100. So that will be 104.9988. So since they ask us to find this approximate value, see, you can just take the increased amount is 4.9988. So you can take the approximate value to be 5, right? And that's how we find these two values. The increase in price level is 3% and the increase in nominal value is 5%. Then the answer has to be the fourth one, right? Answer has to be the fourth one. And this is the problem. I don't know whether you have applied this method or not, but I have seen students doing it in this way. They just take this. Wait, let me just send all this here. Right. So I have seen students doing the calculation this way. The ඔයා මෙහෙම කළා නැත්නම් කිසි ප්‍රශ්නයක් නැහැ. But what if you take the volume of output, the given percentage 2, so you take that 2% here, and while the quantity of money rises by 5%, so you just write 5% here. If the velocity of circulation of money remains the same, okay, then you just assume that there's no change in velocity of money circulation, so you consider that to be 0%. What will be the approximate increase in the price level? So you might have added the two values to find the price level. So what happens when you add the values, you get the price level exactly as 3%. So you might think that this is the exact method of finding that 3. But this method will be accurate only for this given set of values. If you take relatively higher values for these percentages, now in this question we get it as 5% and 2%, and there's no increase at all here for the velocity of money circulation. But if you assume relatively higher values for those variables, then this method will generate an incorrect value. Then you have to go for the method that I mentioned. So that's the accurate method. එතකොට ඔයා හිතන්න එපා මේකෙන් 3 ආවම මේක තමයි හරි කියලා. මොකද හේතුව ගානෙම අහලා තියෙනවා you just need to find an approximate value for this thing. ඒ නිසා අර 2.94 we can round it off to 3. අර 4.99 we can round it off to 4. මොකද ගානේ අහලා තියෙන approximate values නිසා. හැබැයි if these percentages are relatively higher values, you can't just do it. දැන් මෙතනදී mathematics වලින් ඒ කියන්නේ මේ දීලා තියෙන numbers වලින් මේ values දෙක ආවට ඔය numbers higher values ආවම මේ දෙකට values දෙකක් එන්නේ. ඒ කියන්නේ methods දෙකට values දෙකක් එන්නේ. හරි එක මම මේ පෙන්නපු එක. right එක guarantee කරනවා මොකද මේවා statistics මේවා වල indices. එතකොට එහෙම තමයි අපි indices වලදී ගණන් හදන්නේ. එතකොට if it is increased by 2%, you just consider the whole value to be 102. එන එකක් දැනගන්න. Now let's move to this question number 32. It says the following table gives index numbers for a measure of an economy's nominal value of gross domestic product for the period from 2008 to 2012. All right. So what has happened to this nominal GDP? The nominal GDP has decreased. And in the previous question, you learned how to calculate this nominal GDP. So the product of these two we recognize to be the nominal output, right? And what's the requirement? From the data, it can be concluded that from 2008 to 2012, there must have been a fall in which one of the following. All right. So we will go through the given options. The first one, aggregate demand. See, if just think about the opposite of this thing. We say when aggregate demand increases, while this real output remains at a constant level, what happens? The value of the nominal GDP increases. But why does that happen? Because if T remains same, when the aggregate demand increases continuously, the price levels get increased. As a result, the nominal GDP get increased. That will be the outcome if the aggregate demand increases. එහෙනම් මෙතන තියෙන්නේ ඒකේ අනිත් පැත්ත. If the aggregate demand decreases, yes, once again, it's possible for the opposite to happen, which means when the aggregate demand decreases, it's possible for this nominal GDP to decrease. So this could be the answer. But we will go through the other options as well. From the data, it can be concluded that from 2008 to 2012, there must have been a fall in real output. So once again, there's a problem. The problem is the nominal GDP may decrease as a reduction of one of these. It could be due to the reduction of the real output, or it could be due to the reduction of the price level. එතකොට අපිට ඒක හරියටම අඳුර ගන්න බෑ මේක දිහා බලලා. ඒතර අපිට exactly කියන්න බෑ real output අඩු වෙච්ච නිසාම තමයි nominal income එක අඩු වෙලා nominal GDP අඩු වෙලා තියෙන්නේ. හැබැයි aggregate demand එක අඩු වුණාම definitely nominal GDP decreases. ඒතර මේක අර exactly කියන්න බෑ. The rate of inflation. See that now. This is not how you will get the values if the rate of inflation decreases over the period. Now, for example, if you start this year 2008 with the value 100, if the rate of inflation decreases, this is how you will get the values. In 2009, it will be just 200. There will be 100% increase in the price level. And then that 100 increase, that 100% decreases. So in the third year, it will be somewhere around 280. So here, I'm just taking the gap. So the gap, this is not 100% accurate anyway. So the gap is 100. So in this case, even the percentage increase is 100%. So here the gap is 80. So if you just take it as a percentage, that will be 40. See that now the rate of inflation decreases. But still, what happens to the nominal GDP? Nominal GDP gradually increases. හැබැයි මෙතන කියන්නේ the rate of inflation decreases. එහෙමනම් you can't have the values in this way. මේ values වැඩි වෙන්න ඕනි. වැඩි වුණාට ඒවායේ gap එක එන්න අඩු වෙන්න ඕනි. So this is wrong then. The fourth one, the government's budget deficit. And the fifth one, deficit in the trade balance. Okay, the fourth one is about the budget deficit. So just by looking at the nominal GDP, we can't comment on that. And the trade deficit, again, simply by looking at the nominal GDP, we can't comment on the trade balance. Right? Simply by looking at these values, we can comment on that. So for this question 32, answer has to be the first one. Come to this question 33 now. In question 33, it says, which consequence of building a new railway line would be classified as a positive externality? Right. So the first question that I'm going to ask from you is the meaning of externalities. Those are generally, if you just look at the term externalities, those are the costs or maybe the benefits borne by the parties who are not directly engaged in the production activity or maybe the consumption activity. So the costs and the benefits borne by the parties who are directly engaged in this consumption or production activity, we just recognize as private costs or private benefits, not as externalities. Right? So who are the parties directly involved in this given production or consumption activity. So building a railway line. So definitely the railway department is a party engaged directly. So these are the direct, let me recognize them as the parties directly engaged in production or consumption. So we can recognize one main party who's directly engaged in this is the railway department. And then the construction company, and also the passengers. Those are the ones who use this thing, right? So we take passengers. So these are the parties who get directly involved in this production or consumption activity. So whatever the cost or the benefit borne by these parties, we will not label them as external cost or external benefit. If not, generally, we will not label them as externalities. Right. So if there's another party who's not directly involved in this production or consumption, and if that party get a favorable outcome as a result of this railway line, the new railway line, we can recognize that to be a positive externality. එහෙනම් එහෙම එකක් තමයි අපි මෙතනින් හොයාගන්න. Right, let's read this first option. It says a reduction in road accidents. So when they say road accidents, they do not mean the railway or the train accidents. The road accidents in general. එතකොට railway එක පැත්තක road එක තව පැත්තක. So here they just say when the new railway is built, there will be a reduction in road accidents. So if there's a reduction in road accidents, is it something positive? Yes, because it's the reduction of the accidents, and that's something positive. එතකොට මොන accidents ද මේ වෙලාවේ road accidents. ඒතර railway එකට related නැහැ. අනේ එහෙමනම් this is a positive externality. This is borne by an external party, and this is something positive. Enang positive externality. Right. The second one, the increase in profits for the railway department. As we recognized earlier, this railway department is directly engaged in the production or consumption. Hence, this will be private benefit. Their profit will be private benefit, not a positive externality. The third one, the increase in revenue from tourists traveling on the line. So once again, that's a private benefit. Fourth one, the saving in travel time by passengers who travel on the line. So once again, passengers is a party who's directly engaged in this consumption activity. And the fifth one, a reduction in the value of real estate located close to the line. දවා දන්නවනේ රේල් පාර කැදුවට පස්සේ මේකේ සත්‍යයි හැම එකක්ම අර දෙපැත්තේ තියෙන real estate වල value එක අඩු වෙනවා. ඒතර value එක අඩු වෙන එක that is something negative. නිසා this will never be a positive externality. But anyway, even this is an externality. The problem, this is not a positive externality, right? That's a negative externality. So that the answer for this question 33 is the first one. Right, look at this question 34 now. A merit good is a good, we'll read the options, that is made available to consumers according to merit. I don't know the meaning of this thing, right? So there's no meaning as I think. The second one, a merit good is a good that the government believes consumers will buy too little if it is provided by free market. All right. So let me just ask this question. What are the merit goods? Those are the goods that may provide positive externalities. Right? Those are the goods which may generate positive externalities in consumption, mainly in consumption. For example, education, if not the schools. So just think that we are referring to a free market economy where the government role is very limited. If it's a free market economy, we all know that this free market economic system allocates resources just to produce profitable goods, and the distribution of the goods will be totally based on the purchasing power of the consumers. So in a free market economy, if there are schools, right, if there are schools on this side and if there are people on this side, in a free market economy, these schools will be built only for the people who can afford them, right? It will be built only for the people who can afford it. එතකොට අපි හිතමු දැන් these are the people who can afford these schools කියලා. So the schools will be consumed, the education will be consumed only by these people. එතකොට අර majority එකට මොකද වෙන්නේ? They will not be able to afford it, so that they will not demand it, right? They will not demand it. The reason they can't afford it. එහෙනම් මේ කියන scene එක ඇත්ත. මොකද්ද? If it's a merit good, the government believes, not this is just a belief, this is the reality. What is the reality? Consumers will buy too little if it is provided by free market economy. Only the people who can afford it will consume that, and the majority of the people who can't afford will not consume those goods. So that's why we say the government intervention must be there in a free market economy to provide those merit goods. So this is the answer. And the third one, a merit good is a good that the government believes consumers will buy too much if it is provided. No, this is with regard to demerit goods. For demerit goods, there will be a higher demand. So since there is a higher demand, there will be so many producers to produce them, so that there will not be any shortage. They will consume that as much as they need. Right. So the fourth one, a merit good is a good where any benefit obtained by one consumer is extended to all consumers. අර රේල්වේ සිද්ධියම තමයි. දැන් මේගොල්ලෝ මෙතන කතා කරන්නේ දැන් අපි කිව්වේ මොකද්ද? If it's a merit good, there must be positive externalities in consumption. ඒතර ඔයා හිතනවා right now this is referring to those positive externalities. හැබැයි මේ කාගේ benefits ගැනද මේ කතා කරන්නේ? Where any benefit obtained by one consumer is extended to all consumers. Once again, consumers are the parties who are directly engaged in this consumption process. ඒතර ඒගොල්ලෝ අපි අඳුරගන්නේ නැහැ. නැත්නම් මේගොල්ලන්ට වෙන benefit එක අපි අඳුරගන්නේ නැහැ as an externality. externality එකක් වෙන්න නම් දැන් මේ example එකේ මේ passengers ලට වෙන benefit එක අපි අඳුරගත්තේ නැහැනේ as an externality. මේ වෙන කොහෙවත් ඉන්න party එකට යන positive benefit එකනේ අපි අඳුරගන්නේ as a positive externality. ඒ වගේ තමයි දැන් මෙතන consumers ලා වණන් අපි consider කරන්නේ. It's not about the externalities. ඒ නිසා this is totally wrong once again. The fifth one, goods where private benefit of consuming the good exceed its social benefit. No, it's the other way around. So this is also wrong. So for this question 34, second one is the answer. Right, look at this question 35 now. It says a regressive tax is defined as one where, all right, so once again, let me just revise these three types of tax. So on one side, we have progressive tax. And on the other side, we have, let's say, this regressive tax. And then we have proportionate tax. Proportionate tax. So these are the three types of taxes. And how do we define these progressive tax, regressive tax, and proportionate tax? This is how we define it. If it's a progressive tax, we say tax rate increases when tax base increases. But if it's a regressive tax, we say tax rate, I'm referring to the tax rate, the percentage of tax rate decreases when tax base increases. And the third one, in proportionate tax, what happens? The tax rate remains same when tax base increase or maybe when it is decreased. It remains same. Right, now somehow in this question, we just need to look at only about regressive tax. So let me just show you one example for regressive tax. Just imagine that we have two individuals and this person is relatively richer than the first person. So this is A, this is B, size එක දැක්කම you can understand the situation, their income. Right. එහෙමනම් if this person earns rupees, let's say 100,000, and if the other person earns rupees, let's say 1 million, right? Imagine that the tax rate applicable for this person, if it is just, let's say 10%, the tax rate applicable for the second person is 5%. So when you calculate, this is a tax base now, right? We recognize this to be the tax base because this is their income, tax base once again. So if you just take the tax amount, that the amount of, let's say, amount of tax paid by each, amount of tax paid by each person. So 100,000 into 10% will be just 10,000. Right, that will be 10,000, but 1 million into 5% will be how much? That will be 50,000. So 50,000. So what happened? The person B pays a higher tax amount than the person B. He is paying somewhat higher. In rupee terms, he is paying somewhat higher. But as a percentage, he's paying a lower proportion. He's paying a lower percentage of tax compared to the person. So this is what happens in regressive tax. Right. Now, keeping all these things in mind, we will go to this question number 35 and we'll read this. A regressive tax is defined as one where all taxpayers pay the same absolute amount of their income in taxation. මෙහෙමයි mathematics ඒ කියන්නේ numbers නිසා මේක මෙහෙම වෙන්න පුළුවන්. දැන් මම ගත්ත example එක එහෙම වෙන්නේ නැහැ. මම ගත්තේ මොකද්ද? 100,000 and 1 million. One person pays 10% tax, the other one pays 5% tax. හැබැයි මට ඕනේ නම් පුළුවන් මෙයාගේ tax එකත් 10,000 වෙන විදියට මෙතනට වෙන percentage එකක් අරගෙන නැත්නම් මෙයාගේ tax එක 50,000 දැන් සරලම example එක if I make it 50%, then even the person A will pay a tax of 50,000. හැබැයි දැන් උතන ප්‍රශ්නේ තියෙන්නේ how do we label the tax system as regressive or progressive or maybe as proportionate? How do we label that? Is it by looking at this whatever the absolute amount, if not this rupee amount paid by each person? That's not how we differentiate them. We only look at the tax base and the tax rate. So if tax rate is reduced when the tax base is increased, we recognize that to be regressive. එහෙමයි අපි මේක අඳුරගන්න. ඉතින් ඒ නිසා අපිට මෙහෙම මේක define කරන්න බෑ. All taxpayers pay the same absolute amount of their income in taxation. එහෙම එක define කරන්න බෑ. Right. The second option says high income earners pay a lower proportion of their income in taxes. Okay, wait. So high income earners. High income means the tax base. What is it? High income is tax base. Now in this case, the tax base is high. So if their tax base is high, they pay a lower proportion of their income in taxes, which means the tax percentage is low. Okay, see. Tax base is high, tax rate is low, then lower income earners. See, that is exactly what we discussed in our example as well. එහෙනම් Answer for this question 35 is the second one, but we will go through the other options as well. In the third one, it says high income earners pay less in taxes than low income earners. ඒක හිම වෙන්නේ නෑ නේද? They pay relatively lower percentage. I mean, percentage wise, that is true. But if you look at the real figures, the absolute figures, the rupee amounts that each person pays, the higher income earner still pays a higher tax amount. So that this given statement is wrong there. The fourth one, high income earners pay more in tax than low income earners. එතකොට ඒකත් දැන් මගේ එක්සැම්පල් එක එහෙම නොවුනට ඒකත් අපිට වෙනස් කරලා පෙන්වන්න පුළුවන්. දැන් for example, if I make that 5% maybe as 0.1%. Just imagine that I change this value into 0.1%. It's not 5% anymore. It's 0.1%. එතකොට අපි බැලුවොත් එහෙම දැන් එයා ගෙවන්නේ it is just a tax of rupees 1000. එතකොට අර කියන දෙකම හරි. මොකද්ද? The tax rate when the tax base increases. See, the tax base is 100,000, but in the second case the tax base is 1 million. So when the tax base increases, what has happened to the tax rate? That has decreased. As a result, this is a proportionate tax. And on the other hand, surprisingly, in this case, this person B pays a lower absolute, I mean, in rupee terms, he pays a lower tax than the person B. එතකොට එහෙම වෙන්නත් පුළුවන් based on the numbers, based on the tax percentages. It's possible to happen. But the problem, when we define this regressive tax, we don't look at the absolute amount paid by each person. ඒ නිසා මේ දෙකම we can't consider to be the answer. And the fifth one, a regressive tax is defined as one where the tax burden can be shifted backward. Okay, whether it's possible to shift this backward or maybe forward depends on the tax incidence. Right? It will be based on the elasticity of the demand and supply. That has nothing to do with the definition of regressive tax. Anisa, for this question 35, answer is the second one. Right? Answer is the second one. Right. Now let's look at this question 36. Right. In this question 36, they say the table below shows the number of goods X and Y which the two countries A and B produce using composite resource unit. All right. So by giving this table, what do they ask us to calculate? Assume that each country specializes in the product in which it has a comparative advantage. Okay, so අපි 2011 කළා 2012 කළා ඒ දැන් ඒ වගේ ප්‍රශ්නයක් තිබුණා ඒ ප්‍රශ්නේ තිබුණේ just to find the country with the comparative advantage for this given product. හැබැයි මේක එහෙම නෙමෙයි කියන්නේ they don't even ask us to calculate the country or to recognize the country with the comparative advantage for the given product. They just say that the countries have calculated their own opportunity cost and they have recognized their comparative advantages. So they are specialized in producing the product in which they have the comparative advantage. ඉතින් අහන්නේ මොකද්ද එහෙනම්? අහන්නේ the rate of exchange suitable for each country to gain from trade would be. All right. එහෙනම් අපි බලමු මෙන්න මෙහෙම කතන්දරයක්. මේකේ දැන් අපෙන් අහන්නේ අර mutually beneficial exchange rate එක තමයි අහන්නේ. එතකොට ඒක calculate කරන්න නම් we need to once again find the opportunity cost of producing each good in each country. So let me just take this good X and then good Y and we have country A, also we have country B. So this is 100, this is 200, this is 300 and then this is 400. This is how we get the values. So to find the opportunity cost, once again, let me remind you that this is about the output approach, not the input approach. So I just showed you the difference between this input approach and the output approach in the previous paper. I'm just doing the calculations. So we take 200 over 100. So that will be just 2. If it is 2, obviously the other one has to be 0.5. But let me show you how to calculate that thing. So this way you get 0.5. And here you have 400 over 300, which is 1.33. And if it is 1.33, other one has to be 0.75. And how do we get that? We get it in this way, 300 over 400. So the value is 0.75. All right. Now you can recognize the countries with comparative advantage for each product. Right. So when it comes to this good X, in country A, the opportunity cost is 2, but in country B, the opportunity cost is 1.33. So for good X, right, country B has the comparative advantage. And for good Y, this is 0.5. The other one is 0.75. So country A has the comparative advantage. You need to recognize the rate of exchange suitable for each country to gain from the trade. How do we find this? So if you just take this good X, if we do the discussion based on this good X to produce this good X, right? Which country produces this good X? Now we recognize it's this country B. And so when they produce this good X, they sacrifice 1.33 units of good Y. Right? They sacrifice 1.33 units of good Y. Internal exchange ratio 1 unit of good X equals 1.33 units of good Y. If they engage in international trade, expect for 1 unit of good X, they at least expect 1.33 units of good Y. But if you look at the other country A, the opportunity cost of producing this good X is 2 units of good Y. Benefit when they exchange the goods after engaging in international trade, the opportunity cost, then if the opportunity cost is 2, ekata vada adu wenna ona exchange rate එක. එහෙනම් මෙතන මම ලියන්නම් the highest value is 2 units of good Y. එතකොට මට මේකට equal sign දාන්න බෑ, sign දාන්න බැරි හේතුව තමයි ගානේ අහන්නේ this exchange rate has to be beneficial for both countries. Both countries should gain from the international trade. එහෙමනම් අපිට මේ equal sign දාන්න බෑ. මොකද දැම්මොත් there's no gain for the countries. හරි. එහෙනම් ඕක තමයි exchange rate එක වෙන්න ඕනේ. මේක මැද value එකක් තමයි වෙන්න ඕනේ. හරි. එහෙනම් මේක මැද value එකක් අපි හොයාගමු. මොකද මෙතන කියන්නේ 1 to 1. So 1 to 1 කියන එක shape ද බෑනේ. 1 to 1 කියන එක shape නෑ. මොකද minimum is 1.33. එහෙනම් 1 to 1 කියන එක is not acceptable. ඊට පස්සේ 1 to 1.3. 1 unit of X is 1.3 units of Y. So once again, that is equal. If you put the equal sign, then we can engage in international trade, but there's no any benefit for any country by engaging in international trade. So this is also not the answer there. Then the third one, for 1 unit of good X, 1.5 units of good Y. That is beneficial. The reason that value 1.5 falls between these two values. It falls between 1.33 and 2. So the answer has to be the third one there. එතර අනිත් ඒවත් මේ රේන්ජ් එකෙන් පිට තියෙන්නේ. අපලොත් 1 to 2. එතර 1 to 2 කියලා කියන්නේ ආයමත් equal කියන එකනේ. Equal නම් it's not beneficial. ඊළඟට 1 to 3 out of the range. ඒ නිසා The answer for this question 36 is the third one. Right, now look at this question 37. Right, give me 1 second. In question 37, we see this. A Sri Lankan manufacturing firm exports 10 million worth tires to a company in UK. According to the double entry accounting system, which two parts of the balance of payment accounts will be affected by this transaction? Okay, so this is just a sale of, nothing, export of, let's say export of tangible good. Export of tangible good. So let me just quickly show you the balance of payment, then you can understand the affected accounts very easily. Right, look at this balance of payment. This is the real balance of payment related to this year 2022. So when a sale of tangible good happens, you record it in the trade account under exports. So this trade account you receive in the current account. So there are 4 sub accounts in the current account. Clear? So the first one is a trade account, second one is a services account, third one is primary income account, and the fourth one is secondary income account. But since this is a sale of tangible good, you record it in the trade account coming under the current account. So that's where you record the income that you receive. And on the other side, we receive cash, and to record that cash, we go to the financial account. So in the financial account, you can record it under currency and deposits. Those are the 2 accounts that get affected by this transaction. Right. So if you come back to this, it says which 2 parts of the balance of payments accounts will be affected by this transaction. The first one, exports in the current account. Yes, true. Capital transfers in the capital account. No, we do not record it in capital transfers. The second one, exports in the capital transfers කියලා කොහොමත්ම ගන්න විදිහක් නැහැ. The second exports in the current account, true. Incomes in the current account, no. One goes to the current account, I mean the trade account coming under the current account. The other one goes to the currency and deposits account. So this is also wrong there. The third one, exports in the current account, yes. Reserve assets in financial, yes, it's a financial account, but not the reserve, not under the reserve. It may go to the reserve asset if whatever the dollar amount is kept by the central bank. If it is coming to the commercial banks, then it goes under the currency account, as I mentioned earlier. But this one is little problematic. The fourth one, liabilities in the financial account, totally wrong. And claims on non-residents in financial account, totally wrong. Exports in the current account, yes. Claims on, no, wrong. So from the given 5 options, the most suitable one, either the correct one or the most suitable one. So the most suitable one is the third one. Right, so that's the third one. Right, come to this question 38. The Department of Statistics of a country wishes to present its final balance of payments account. It has calculated the current account balance, okay, the capital account balance and the financial account balance. The additional information required to complete the task is, okay, even for this answer lies here in this balance of payment. So if I show you the main accounts that you get in this balance of payments, see the first main account is the current account, then we get the capital account, we have the financial account, and here look at this one. After all, we have another one here, that's this net errors and omissions. So if you have all these 4 balances, the current account balance, the capital account balance, the financial account balance, and the net errors and omissions account balance, yeah, you can present the balance of payment exactly in this way. Right. So let's go back to the question. They have already recognized the current account balance, the capital account balance, and the financial account balance, and one is still missing. And what's the missing one? I showed you. That's the errors and omissions account. So for this question 38, third one is the answer. So no point of looking at the other ones, because if you see the real BOP, you can identify the answer easily. Right. So come to this question 39. In question 39, it says, country's terms of trade currently stands at 150. See that now මේකයි අර මම අර ඔයාලට කලින් කියවනේ ගානක් මේකයි මම කියවනේ එතනත් මේ ස්ටැටිස්ටික්ස් වල ඉන්ඩීසස් තමයි තියෙන්නේ කියලා. ඒතර ඒ මම කියපු දේ ප්‍රූව් වෙනවා ඔය දැන් අපිට අහුවෙච්ච අලුත් ගානේ. මොකද්ද? දැන් කට්ටිය බලා ගන්න. මේ අලුත් ගානේ මෙන්න මෙහෙම කියනවා. In question 39, country's terms of trade currently stands at 150. See that now, currently stands at 150. So that's the current value. So if you just look at the increased amount, base year 2010 and there the value is 100. See, compared to that base year 100, this has increased by 50% and currently it stands at the level 150. So in this year, we can take that value to be 150. This is not the increased amount. It stands at this level compared to the base year value. So how do we find these terms of trade? You take the export price index, divide this by import price index, and you multiply this by 100. මොකද හේතුව මෙතන තියෙන price index එකක් ඒකත් percentage එකක් මෙයත් percentage එකක්. Percentages get cancelled. So in order to keep this terms of trade as a percentage, you need to multiply this once again by 100. Right. So terms of trade stands at the level 150, and be careful. Since 2010, the average price that country has received for its exports has increased by 20%. See that now. The average price that country has received for its exports has increased by 20%. Now it stands at the value 120. Then they ask, thus the average price it has paid for its imports should have changed by which one of the given percentages? Okay, we can calculate that. So for the time being, just take this import price index to be X and find that X. So 120 over 150 multiplied by 100, and this will give us the value 80%. So the meaning of this 80% is, right now the price index stands at 80. Price index stands at 80, but previously in the base year it was 100, but now it's just 80, which means the import price has decreased by how much? It has decreased by 20%. So the answer for this question 39 is the third one. එහෙනම් මම හිතනවා මේ values වල දැක්කමත් අතන values දැක්කමත් ඒ කියපු දේවල් එකට එකක් tally වෙනවා. එතකොට ඒක තමයි හරිම විදිහ. Right. So come to this question number 40. Assume that a representative basket of goods cost $120 in USA. Okay, so in USA market we have this basket of goods. If not, again this is statistics. We have this sample of goods. And I mean in USA it will cost $120. The same basket of goods cost rupees 9,600 in Sri Lanka. Okay, so if you try to purchase that basket of goods or the sample of goods in Sri Lanka, that will be rupees 9,600. Then මොකක්ද අහන්නේ? It can be deduced from this that by looking at this thing, we can understand the requirement. The requirement is to find the purchasing power parity exchange rate. So if you remember this paper 2012, we did this calculation. ඒකයි මේක අර දිගටම අහගෙන ඉන්න එකේ වටිනකම. ඔයා එතන ඒ calculation එක අහගෙන හිටියනම් you can understand how to find this purchasing power parity exchange rate. So if you know that, you can find the answer easily. එහෙනම් if it's the same basket of goods, in USA we pay $120, but in Sri Lanka we paid 9,600 rupees. එහෙනම් මේ දෙක තමයි මේ දෙකේ ratio එක තමයි that's the real purchasing power parity exchange rate. එතකොට අපි මේක බැලුවොත් එහෙම if it is 120 to 9,600, when it is just $1, how much is that? We take 9,600 and we divide it by 120. So $1, the ratio goes as $1 to 9,600 divided by 120, 80 rupees 80 rupees 80. See, then the answer is this fourth one. Purchasing power parity exchange rate is rupees 80 per dollar. 100% correct. So fourth one is the answer. Right. Look at this question number 41 now. It says foreign direct investment in developing economies is likely to result which one of the following? All right. So having FDIs is really good for the economic growth in the developing countries. So let's try to recognize the correct answer out of the given ones. The first one, a reduction in local wage levels. No, I don't think so. When foreign direct investments flow to the country, there will be so many factories in the country, and then the available labor will be very limited. So the wage rate may actually go up, right? It may go up, not that it decreases. So because we have a higher demand for labor, so when the demand increases, the wage rate may go up. But this says the opposite, so this is not the answer. Second one, a reduction in tax revenues in developing countries. No, this is the tax revenue will actually improve. Okay, when the number of factories get increased, the production get increased. When production increases, the level of employment increases. When the level of employment increases, the income increases. When income increases, even the tax revenue that is charged on the income will be increased. So the opposite happens again. Question 41, the third one. Foreign direct investment in developing economies is likely to result a reduction in the range of consumer goods. Totally unacceptable. This is totally false. When the production increases due to FDIs, as consumers, we will have a wide range of choice. The fourth one, worsening of net foreign income from investments. Net foreign income flows from investment is possible. The reason, if you just look at this BOP once again, right? Now, I told you that this has mainly for different accounts. The first one is, the current account. So under the current account, we have another four again. The first one is the trade account, services account, primary income account, and the fourth one is the secondary income account. So that question is talking about this primary income account. If you look at the primary income payments, right? These payments may include mainly, look at this one, the primary income account. This is where all transactions related to foreign factor incomes and foreign factor payments are recorded. And it includes following components, mainly two. But under the second one, under the investment income, we have three: profits, dividends, and the interest income. See, in the long run, when the FDI comes, that will be initially beneficial for the country. But what happens if they get their dividends to the main country? There will be a significant payment of primary income. Then what will happen if you check this balance of payment? In the balance of payment, the payment part will be very higher compared to the primary income receipts, like in this case. So that is what has happened in this BOP as well. The payment part is very higher, significantly higher compared to the receipts. So that could be a possible downside of this. So let's go back to the question. Foreign direct investments in developing countries is likely to result a worsening of net foreign income flows from investment. මොකද ඒගොල්ලෝ investments කියන්නේ dividends අරගෙන යනවා, interest අරගෙන යනවා. ඒ මොනාම that value will be negative. Net foreign income will be negative. Right, the fifth one, a worsening of capital account of the balance of payment. No, there will be a positive impact on the capital account of the balance of payment, not a negative influence. So for this question 41, fourth one is the answer. Right, we'll look at this question 42. What is typically associated with a relatively low level of income per capita in country? Okay, so how do we calculate this per capita income? Per capita income or GDP, whatever, is equal to, you take the GDP or the income, you divide it by mid-year population. You divide it by mid-year population. So if per capita income per capita, if it is very low, what does that denote? What does it denote? Either this, if this value is lower, either the GDP has to be lower. If not, according to this equation, this has to be higher. ඔකනේ වෙන්න ඕන. එහෙනම් ඔය මොකක් හරි එකක් තමයි මෙතන ආන්සර් එක වෙන්න ඕන. High rate of savings. No, if the savings, if we have a higher rate of savings, then GDP, savings is the source of investment. Hope you all remember that. And if we have a higher rate of savings, investment will be high. And if investments are higher, then there will be a higher GDP. The opposite happens. Make a gun back. And the second one, a low rate of economic growth. It could be, right? It could happen. I mean, if GDP is low, we say the continuous increase in the productive capacity we recognize as the economic growth. And if GDP reduces continuously, then definitely the economic growth will be very low. So that is a possible scenario. Right. The third one, a low rate of inflation. Inflation is low when the income per capita is low. No, there's no direct relationship between the two. The fourth one, a low rate of population growth. No, the population growth has to be higher for this per capita income to decrease. So the opposite is true. High rate of employment. No, if GDP is low due to this low per capita income, then there will be a lower rate of employment. Unemployment will be high. And out of the given answers, the only acceptable answer for this question 42 will be the second one. All right, look at this question 43. A combination of factors which is most likely to generate a more rapid economic growth is. So once again, as I mentioned here, what is economic growth? How do we define economic growth? Think and tell me. So as I mentioned earlier, a continuous increase in the productive capacity. If not, a continuous rightward shift of the PPC, we recognize as the economic growth. right? එහෙනම් අපි බලමු මොකක්ද ආන්සර් කියලා. An increase in employment. See, increase in employment, which means right now the resources are unemployed. Right now the economy is here, but in unemployment reduces, if not employment increases. But does that ensure that the productive capacity increases? No. If the productive capacity is not increased, then there's no economic growth. So this option is wrong. Look at the second one now. An increase in the level of investment. So as I mentioned earlier, savings we recognize as the source of investment, and when the level of investment increases, the capital resources get increased. The amount of capital resources get increased. ඒ තුනේ relationship එකක් තියෙනවා කියලා අපි මුල දවස්වලනේ කතා කළේ. So savings, having higher savings will make investments, and when investments happen, what happens to the amount of capital resources? That will increase. So when the amount of capital resources get increased, when the machineries get increased, when highways get built, what happens to the PPC? What happens to the productive capacity? Even that increases. So that is true. And the size of the working, see that now, again, the size of the working population, the labor force increases. So once again, when the labor force increases, the productive capacity increases, so that the economic growth happens. So this is the answer. මොකද දේවල් දෙකේම කියන්නේ දෙපැත්තෙම තියෙන දේවල් වලින් දෙපැත්තෙම තියෙන දේවල් facilitate to the economic growth. But we will go through the other points as well. More equal distribution of wealth and greater level of transfer payments. මේක වෙනම scene එකක්. ඒ කියන්නේ there's no such connection between equal distribution of wealth and the economic growth. මේක ඇතුව හෝ නැතුව economic growth can happen. And on the other side, when there is this higher level of transfer payment, that is a burden to the economy. So that will increase this government expenditure. You know what will happen? When the government expenditure get increased for transfer payments, that will have a negative impact on the economic growth. Then the government will not have enough resources, enough financial resources to build infrastructure capital in the economy. So again, this is wrong. The fourth one, more rapid inflation and an increase in national debt. See that now, if the national debt is very high, they will not have resources to make investments. If there is this inflation, due to the inflation, the people will reduce the consumption. When the consumption is reduced, the production will be reduced. When the production reduces, again the opposite happens, not the economic growth, the opposite happens. The fifth one, an increase in foreign direct investment. Okay, yes, due to foreign direct investments, the productive capacity increases, it's true. Increase in interest rates. No, once again, as we discussed in one of the previous questions, when interest rates get decreased, when interest rates get increased, it will be very difficult for people to afford loans. They will not be able to make new investments, start businesses. So that again, it will negatively impact on economic growth. And from all these given options, the best one is the second one. Right. So question 44. In question 44, we get this. The table below shows for a given year, the figures for consumption, gross capital formation and depreciation in 5 countries, namely A, B, C, D, E. Okay, all measured in millions of US. Okay. So we have the 5 countries, the consumption level, the gross capital formation, the depreciation. And then by giving all these, they ask us to recognize, given the state of technology remains unchanged, okay, the level of technology remains unchanged, the country which is which is most likely to experience economic growth. So once again, it's about economic growth. So as I explained earlier, when economic growth happens, the productive capacity increases. එතකොට productive capacity increase වෙන නම් there are mainly three reasons. The amount of resources should go up. If not, the technology should increase. If not, the productivity should increase. Other than based on the given question, nothing happens to the technology. And also we don't have information to calculate the productivity. එහෙනම් වෙන්න පුළුවන් එකම දේ මොකද්ද? If one country has increased the amount of resources compared to their previous years, that country will be able to increase their productive capacity, and then that country will be able to achieve economic growth. හරි එහෙනම් මේ දීලා තියෙන data වලින් අපිට කරන්න පුළුවන් ඇත්තටම මෙච්චරයි. Consumption, I don't really understand why this is given to us. But by looking at the gross capital formation and the depreciation, you can calculate the net investment. Right? You can calculate the net investment. So how do we find the net investment? I hope that you will remember this equation. We discussed this equation in grade 12. What is the equation? Gross investment equals capital depreciation plus net investment. So net investment is the real additions. That part shows the real additions to the amount of existing capital. And you can find this net investment and you can see whether there is any increase in the amount of existing capital stock in these given countries. So how do we find that? Gross investment minus capital depreciation equals net investment. Hope you can understand that equation. So the gross investment is equal to the gross capital formation. Both are same, synonyms. So that minus depreciation. So from this you get minus 10. From this you get plus 50. From this you get minus 200. From this you get 0. And from this one you get minus 200. So see what has happened. In all these countries, in country A, in country C, and in country E, the amount of capital resources has really decreased. And in country D, nothing has happened to the amount of capital resources. They just maintain it in the same level. But maintaining the amount of capital resources in the same level does not ensure an increase in productive capacity. And so even for country D, it's very difficult to achieve this economic growth. But if you look at this country B, what has happened? Their net investment is a positive value, which means they have added new capital resources to their existing amount of capital so that their productive capacity increases so that they can achieve economic growth. Then the answer is the second one. Then this question number 45, supply side policies are generally understood to be policies which, all right, so let me just show you this, the theory note related to this thing. Right, now everyone look at this. It's about supply side policies, nothing supply management policies. It says policies used to influence aggregate demand are known as supply management policies. These policies aim to increase the production capacity by increasing the market efficiency, by increasing the productivity, and thereby to achieve economic growth. So what do they mainly do? These policies try to improve, increase the efficiency, the productivity, and thereby to achieve economic growth. All right, so let's go back to the question. It says supply side policies are generally understood to be the policies which improve productivity and reduce market imperfections. In this case, reducing market imperfections meaning reducing the number of monopolies, increasing the competition, healthy competition, removing barriers to trade, then make it easy to do the businesses. So such activities we recognize as reducing market imperfections. So when that happens, once again, the efficiency improves, the productivity improves, and thereby the economy can achieve economic growth. So answer is the first one. So I don't think that there's any meaning in the other ones, other options given. So the second one, enable the government to supply as many goods and services as possible. See that now there's no meaning in that. The third one, reduce the supply. No, it increases the supply. Reduce inflation by controlling interest rates and promote aggregate demand. No, these are not supply side policies. These are demand management policies. The fourth one and the fifth one are demand management policies. Right. Look at this question number 46. The table below shows the share of total income of different income groups in an economy in 2000 and in 2010. So income group, we get the percentage share of total income in year 2000 and year 2010. Okay. So the requirement is from the data, it may be concluded that over the period in question, okay, from 2000 to 2010, the bottom income groups experienced a fall in their income. All right, okay. So we can recognize the correct answer simply by observing the values given in this table. So bottom 10%, 20%, 30%. So what has happened to their proportion, if not their percentage of share of the total income? That has decreased. Right? The bottom 10%, 20%, 30%, whatever the amount of income that they own has decreased. Wait, I did a mistake. I just told you that whatever the amount of income that they own. No, it's wrong. The percentage of income they own has decreased over this period. The percentage has decreased, but if the total income in the country has increased, even if the percentage decreases, their absolute income may increase. Right? It may increase, but somehow by looking at the table, we can understand that their percentage of income has decreased. And what has happened to the percentage actually? That has passed to the top 30, 20, 10. ඒ කියන්නේ මේගොල්ලන්ගෙන් අඩු වෙන ටික කාටද පාස් වෙලා තියෙන්නේ? To the top 20, top 10, top 30 ඒගොල්ලන්ට පාස් වෙලා තියෙන්නේ. එහෙනම් මෙහෙම ඉන්කම් එක ඔය වගේ ප්‍රශ්නයක් තිබුණා I think in 2011 paper නැති මිනිස්සුන්ගේ සල්ලි අරගෙන තියෙන මිනිස්සුන්ට පාස් කළොත් මොකද වෙන්නේ කියලා. ඒතකොට ඒකම තමයි මේ වෙන විදිහට ටේබල් එකක් දීලා ඒගොල්ලෝ අහන්නේ. So what happens? The income disparity increases. The income inequality increases. ඕක තමයි වෙන්නේ. හරි. එහෙනම් we will read the given options. The bottom income groups experienced a fall in their income. Not really. අර මම කිව්වේ මට වැරදුනා කියලා. ඒ කියන්නේ හිතන්නකෝ දැන් in year 2000 the total income of the country. So let's say total income. If the total income in the country is 100, these people, if you just select this bottom 10%, they have received rupees 4.1 as their income. But we don't know what has happened to the total income in the country in year 2010. So what if this has increased to 500? Then they receive 4.1%, sorry, they receive 2.5% from 500. So 500 into 2.5% will be 12.5. So that will be just 12.5. So earlier they received an income of 4.1, but now they receive an income of 12.5. But as a percentage, what has happened? That has decreased. So they are still earning higher than what they received earlier. So this is wrong thing. Second one, the distribution of income become more unequal. Yes, disparity increases. The third one, the distribution of wealth become more unequal. Maybe lokuma වෙනසකුත් නැහැ ඉතින් income and wealth කියන එකේ, but the table is about income. ඒ නිසා we can't select the third one to be the answer. Second one has to be the answer there. Fourth one, everyone became better off because total income increased. We don't know what has happened to the total income. I did this discussion assuming that this total income has increased. Even it could decrease. We can't be sure about this thing. And the fifth one, Gini coefficient has decreased. No, if the inequality increases, even the Gini coefficient increases. If you do statistics, you should have calculated the Gini coefficient. You should know how to calculate that thing. Even in economics, we teach that. If inequality increases, even the Gini coefficient increases. Right. So 47. Which one of the following changes would best indicate that a country has experienced development? So what is development? How do we define development? That is a movement from an unfavorable condition to a favorable condition that we recognize as development. And first one, an improvement in the average citizen's quality of life. 100% true. Arabama kipikai mekai align right. And the second one, an increase in country's real GDP. No, increase in real GDP is just economic growth, not development. So this is wrong. An improvement in the country's trade balance. No, that is not even economic growth. Body එක part එකක් විතරයි. And appreciation in the country's currency. No, an increase in the adult literacy rate. When I say an increase in the adult literacy rate, this is a part of development. That's true. Have I then inside the first one, the fifth one is included anyway. When they say in general an improvement in the average citizen's quality of life, inside that quality of life, the literacy rate is also included. Out of the given ones, the best one is the first one. Right. Then this 48th question, economists have proposed that the best policy to promote development is trade, not aid. The implication of this proposal is that developing countries should. Okay, so this is the idea behind this slogan or whatever thing. Trade, not aid. The developed countries should facilitate the developing countries to engage in trade. The developed countries should provide more opportunities for these developing countries to export their goods to the developed countries. So that's the meaning of this thing. එතකොට ඒකට හරි specific meaning එකක් තියෙනවා. ඒතකොට මේ meaning එක තියෙන්නේ the developing countries should be given greater access to markets in developed countries. අර GSP plus වගේ දේවල් වලින් ඒක තමයි මේ කරන්නේ. එහෙනම් for this question 48, second one is the answer. Right. Question 49. Some of the demographic data for country X is given in the following table. So by giving all these values, what do they ask us to calculate? Unemployment rate and also labor force participation rate. එතකොට ඔයාලට මතක නම් ඔය දෙකම මම හිතන්නේ අපි කලින් කරපු papers වලත් calculate කළා මොනවද? Unemployment rate and the labor force participation rate. Now how do we find this unemployment rate? Let me write unemployment rate is equal to, you take unemployed population, you divide it by labor force, and you multiply this by 100. So unemployed population is given to us as 9. labor force දැන් මේක පරණ paper එකක් නිසා තමයි 10 years and over කියලා තියෙන. දැන් ඒක වෙනස් වෙලානේ තියෙන්නේ. ඒතර labor force එක අපි ගත්තොත් this is the population, the working age population, and from that if you subtract the population not economically active, if you deduct this 60 you get 90. එහෙම නැත්නම් if you get the total of employed and unemployed, you once again receive the same 90. So either way, you can just take it. So somehow you need to find the labor force and put it here and multiply that by 100. So obviously answer is 10%. So the unemployment rate is 10%. And how do we find this labor force participation rate? එතන මේක අපි කලින් එකත් මම කිව්වා වගේ calculate කළා. So we write labor force divided by working age population. Working age population multiplied by 100. So labor force is 90, working age population is, we need to consider this to be the working age population, that is 150. We multiply this by 100, then the answer will be 60. Right, 60. And our answer for this question 49 is the first one. Then the 50th question, in a given economy, both employment and unemployment grows over a period of 10 years. Then ඕකට උත්තරේ මේ ගානෙම තියෙනවා. දැන් මමම කිව්වා මොකද්ද? You can calculate the labor force either by subtracting this 60 from 150. එහෙම නැත්නම් you can find that same value simply by adding these two. ඒතර දැන් මේක කියන්නේ මොකද්ද? මේ ඕන එකකින් ගත්තම you can find the labor force. Right? එහෙනම් දැන් මේක කියන්නේ both employed and unemployed, employment and unemployment grows over a period of 10 years, which means the labor force has increased. Right? The labor force has increased. ඔක තමයි idea එක. This situation must have been produced by an increase in labor force. Labor force මේකේ නැති නිසා අපි තෝරගන්නේ මොකද්ද? Economically active population. ඉතින් හරි, labor force තමයි economically active population. Both are same. For this question number 50, second is the answer.